Shalom, first and foremost, I'd like to give all praise to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakal Kadash. Double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who are teaching this truth. Brakawah Yahweh, Bakara Yahushai, Ba'ashem Rakal Kadash, Brakatam. So, what we got going on here is, this is where our focus needs to be, is on Syria and the region, because Syria and Iran are both being attacked. Iran's being attacked financially, but they're planning an airstrike by the end of this year. You haven't seen the prior videos talking about that. Go ahead and check them out. Anyhow, I'm going to be looking into this and reading some articles on this, but Idlib is key to Syria being restored back to being in power. In other words, the government being in control. And, Esau loves to take down videos showing you true footage of everything, but we'll do everything we can to keep it on there, Always be careful what you title your videos, because if you title it something else, like you can say Amalek all you want to, but the moment you say Israeli state in your titles, man, that's when they take it down. So that's why my video was taken down a couple days ago, because I was talking about the Israeli state bombing the Damascus airport. And so they just took down the video because I said Israeli state. If I just said Amalek bombs Damascus airport, they wouldn't have given us shit. Because like I said, the longer length video, which was titled something else, on Confusion Face Reading 2 channel, nothing happened to it. The same footage was on there. The same 15 minutes where I'm reading the articles and showing you the coverage. So again, it's what you title your videos, And so like everything else, though, this battle is going to escalate, leading up to what I believe the Damascus overthrow, when they actually destroyed Damascus from being a city, causing it to be in ruinous heap. Isaiah chapter 17 and Jeremiah 49 concerning Damascus. Because what's going to happen is Bashar al-Assad is going to liberate Idlib. And as a retaliatory method, they're going to destroy Damascus, that is Amalek, and the United States. Between the two, because either way, we're talking about the nation of Esau, Edom, and we're just going to keep looking at these things. So I'm just going to go ahead and read some articles, Shalom, Brakatah, and take a good look at it.
And this article comes right out of RT, and I'm just going to continue from here with some videos from RT. This is reported as of August 30. 2018. Idlib to become Syria's final battle with terrorists if the West stays out of it. And we know the West ain't staying out of it, because the Israeli state, Amalek, has continued their war of terror against Syria. Syrian forces are gearing up to take the latest terrorist stronghold. The U.S. is boosting its military presence, and Russia is warning of a false flag chemical weapons attack. And, of course, we know that pretty much, we've been the first on this, we watchmen, watching the things that are going on. RT looks at the aligning of forces ahead of the Battle of Idlib. American warships, cruise missile delivery systems, strategic bombers, and other hardware has arrived in the Mediterranean and the Persian Gulf earlier this week. Washington is denying that any buildup is taking place, but Moscow says the assets are being gathered for a massive strike against the Syrian government. And this is, prior, when we know that the White Helmets did stage the chemical attack earlier this year and last year for Idumea, another name of Edom, to launch their terrorist attack. Better known as the Whore Babylon the Great. A provocation with chemical weapons staged by the jihadists will be used as a pretext for the attack, and Damascus will again be groundlessly accused of poisoning its own people, Russia said in April. A massive bombardment of Syria by the United States, UK, and France was triggered by what Russia says was a similarity staged false flag operation. And yeah, we have false flag operations all over America. You have your crisis actors, things like that, to try to convince you that these events taking place when it's nothing more than a staging crew. Jabhat al-Nusra and other militants in Idlib stand no chance against the Syrian Arab army, backed by Russia and Iran, which, you could call that Hezbollah. but Western interference may give them a fighting chance. The United States and its allies are making every effort to preserve jihadist forces and use them to remove Syrian President Bashar al-Assad from power, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov recently said. Again, you know, the United States is going to provocate this war. Now we'll just take a look at some more videos here.
Now, the northwestern Syrian province of Idlib, said to be the last bastion of terrorists in Syria, is a target of Syrian forces in Russia. A military operation there is said to be imminent, but the U.S. is more concerned about the so-called rebels there. U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a warning to Russia, the Syrian army, and Iran not to attack that area recklessly, implying that civilians will be targeted. That's a viewpoint far from the truth.
US President Donald Trump on Monday warned Syria and its allies Iran and Russia not to launch what he described as a reckless attack on Idlib. Trump, in a tweet message, warned that hundreds of thousands would be killed if Idlib, which is the last stronghold of the terrorists, is attacked. His warning comes as Russia, along with the Syrian army, have made huge efforts to create humanitarian corridors before the offensive. An offensive that will all but confirm Syria's victory against the terrorists in the 7-year war in the country. Therefore, it is generally believed that Trump's warning that Syria and Russia would kill hundreds of civilians on purpose is not in line with reality. But why has the US gone as far as issuing such a dramatic warning about an operation that Syria needs to rid the country from terrorists?
Supported these mercenaries, these are not rebels, who have been at war against Syria for quite some time. And this is the last stand. A lot of these individuals that are in Idlib province now are the ones that have surrendered in other provinces around the country. Even many from Aleppo that surrendered ended up in Idlib. It was a safe haven given to the people who surrendered. And this safe haven has been unfortunately used to rebuild forces and continue terrorist activities. So these individuals were already given a chance. And now that it is the last stand for the American and their allies supported terrorists, the Americans are saying, hey, don't wipe out our final resources in the area. And I think what's happening is the Americans are seeing it as their last push in order to obviously make a statement and finally final try, I should say, to overthrow Assad. I don't think they'll be successful.
And now Idlib is home to approximately 5,000 to 10,000 terrorists. West refers to them as the rebels. Dominant group there is called the Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, previously known as Al-Nusra Front, before renouncing its ties to Al-Qaeda. There are also around 1 million civilians which make a military attack. They're very dangerous. A UN Special Envoy to Syria, Staffan de Mistura, has urged countries that have influence on terror groups to focus on initiatives that may spare civilian lives. He also begged them to pressure the terrorists not to use them as human shields. Now, which countries may he be referring to? After all, those countries cannot be Russia, Syria, or Iran, and therefore it leaves the U.S. and Saudi Arabia as your primary suspects.
Iran has called for the terrorists to be cleared out of Idlib. The country's Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif has emphasized that efforts to drive terrorists out of the northwestern Syrian province would take place with the least humanitarian cost. He also rejected Trump's warning that the Idlib offensive would be a humanitarian mistake and said the US president wants to take advantage of the situation in Idlib for his own foreign policy goals. Russia has also rejected Trump's warning and said Idlib, which it described as a nest of terrorism, needed to be liberated so that peace could be restored to Syria. The current signs show that Syria is closer more than ever to the end of a 7-year war with the terrorists. Unless US allies have other plans in mind to prevent a victory. Israel has for the first time admitted that it supported these so-called rebels or terrorists in the occupied Golan Heights. Will it continue to support these terrorists to continue to destabilize Syria? And what about Saudi Arabia? Will the regime there continue its support of terrorists?
Terrorists and the mercenaries that were hired by the West that have settled in Idlib, and these individuals are basically the last stand for the West and certainly the final battle for Syria.
Syria's victory would be a setback for the United States and some of its regional and extra-regional allies that face allegations of supporting the terrorists. This could clearly explain why President Trump is worried about what he is trying to portray as a humanitarian mistake. However, many believe it is in fact a rightful move on the part of Syria to regain a peace it has been denied for 7 years now.
Поэтому они, вероятно, попросили, чтобы очистили справа-слева дороги. Мы с вами сейчас находимся в районе Эль-Кунейтры, где силы УНДОФ проводят рекогносцировку пункта пропуска с территории подконтрольной Сирийской Арабской Республики на территорию подконтрольную Израилем. Задача – открыть дорогу М7 с направления населенного пункта Баас через разрушенную Кунейтру, далее на территорию подконтрольную Израилю. Цель открытия этой дороги М7 – это возможность передвижения командующего УНДОФ силами УНДОФ, передвижения патруля УНДОФ с территории подконтрольной Сирийской арабской армии на территорию подконтрольную государству Израиль. Командующего группировки войск. Вот как оно пошло, больше менять ничего не надо. Да.
Yes, we'll remove this. Okay. You will take this thing away. Yeah. You will put there.
That's it.
Давай.
We start this evening in Syria, where the military is building up forces in preparation to liberate Idlib province. It's drawing the attention of the White House and those who say this could lead to the end of the country's 7-year war. RT's Dan Cohen brings us the latest.
The battle lines have been drawn. It's the final hurdle for the Syrian government to regain control of the entire country. Troops are stationed along Idlib's border. They're backed by Russian forces and set to begin operations. Inside Idlib, militants from Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, once known as the Al-Nusra Front or Al-Qaeda, have dug their heels in, and their leader has declared anyone who surrenders is a traitor.
Our weapons are the source of our strength and honor. Thinking about surrendering to the enemy and handing over weapons will be considered treason.
Opposition media outlets claim Russia has already begun launching airstrikes on Idlib. However, there's been no official confirmation. On Monday night, U.S. President Donald Trump warned Russia and Iran against attacking Idlib in a tweet.
President Bashar al-Assad of Syria must not recklessly attack Idlib province. The Russians and Iranians would be making a grave humanitarian mistake to take part in this potential human tragedy. Hundreds of thousands of people could be killed. Don't let that happen.
The White House went on to release a statement warning, quote, that if President Bashar al-Assad chooses to again use chemical weapons, the United States and its allies will respond swiftly and appropriately. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov insisted Russia works to minimize civilian casualties.
We are now doing all we can, along with our Turkish and Iranian colleagues and the Syrian government, to separate the armed opposition from the terrorists in the area, to ensure that civilian lives are spared in any military operation.
For President Trump, it's a marked shift in rhetoric. In April, he referred to Syria's president as Animal Assad. Now he calls him president. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Nikki Haley echoed Trump, writing on Twitter, "All eyes on the actions of Assad, Russia, and Iran in Idlib. Hashtag no chemical weapons." This comes months after the U.S. bombed Syrian government installations on the basis of a chemical weapons attack, which it later admitted it had no evidence even occurred. With the end of the 7-year conflict in sight and the Syrian and Russian militaries dominant on all fronts, it's hard to see why Assad would resort to chemical weapons and essentially invite another U.S. attack. Reporting in Washington, Dan Cohen, RT.
For more on all of this, we turn to former Pentagon official Michael Maloof. Michael, U.S. President Donald Trump on Monday warned Syrian President Bashar al-Assad by tweeting out the Russians and Iranians would be making a grave humanitarian mistake to take part in this potential human tragedy. Hundreds of thousands of people could be killed. Don't let that happen. Michael, as I've asked so many times since President Trump went into office, what do you make of President Trump's tweet and what is missing from it?
Well, there's a lot of consideration going into this. This is the last part of a major offensive for the Syrian government to take over the western portion. And I think what's of some concern is not only the potential humanitarian crisis that could occur, but I think it's also an effort by the United States to offset any advances by the Syrian government and the Russians to go and retake eastern Syria, east of the Euphrates, and I think that they're going to look for any provocation of any kind, real or imagined, to hold that Idlib encounter and not take any advance on it, and I think that the United States does not want to give up the East, and that's the problem. The other problem too is that you have Al Qaeda and other jihadi Salafists in that area. Now, Russia and Syria are very concerned and aware of the humanitarian potential crisis. There are ways to go about that. Maybe open up corridors and highways, strategic highways, to allow the government in to minimize that kind of problem. But so far, any bombing has been in the peripheral areas.
Well, it's interesting. You did bring up, when you started, a couple of the different groups that are in the area. Yes. Who exactly is President Assad taking control of Idlib from, and why at this stage?
Well, there are an estimated 10 to 30,000 Al Qaeda in that Idlib area, and it's almost impossible to distinguish who the bad guys are. And even Turkey now has basically said that Al Qaeda will be a target, and they have forces that are moving in. That's another problem too, because if there's any fighting, you have Turkish forces which are going to be in the fray. So this is what makes this Idlib undertaking so complex and difficult, notwithstanding the fact that it's the last bastion, if you would, in the West. But there are political considerations. You've got Russia, Iran, and Turkey meeting over the weekend to discuss this and to try and hammer out a way to try and minimize a humanitarian disaster.
Al-Qaeda, a group that is very familiar in negative ways with people here in the West. And so it's interesting to hear that they're also, that they're such a dominant place. You know, the White House also issued another warning today saying, let us be clear that it remains our firm stance that if President Bashar al-Assad chooses to again use chemical weapons, the United States and its allies will respond swiftly and appropriately. I have to ask, how can we be sure, how can the White House be so sure that it's Assad? The Russians have been warning for several weeks now that another attack was likely. Well,
they've been giving the warnings. They've passed intelligence, the Russians have, to the United States. And this is the problem. This is why the potential for a false flag is there. And what would drive the United States, real or imagined, to have an attack on the ground that would then prompt the United States to engage in a kinetic way.
Well, it's definitely a very interesting powder keg of an area that's going to continue.
Absolutely.
Can either escalate or can de-escalate.
That's
Thanks
correct.
for joining us, Michael.
Sure.
For the first time in modern Russia, the Navy and Air and Space Forces drills take place in the Mediterranean Sea. The ships of the Northern, Baltic, Black Sea fleets and the Caspian flotilla, as well as long-range aircraft, are being brought to the exercise. The drills are controlled by the Major Command of Navy. A total of 26 ships, 2 submarines and 34 aircraft are involved.
I want to point out that in order to strictly observe the norms of international law, as well as to ensure the safety of navigation and aircraft flights, the training areas in advance are declared temporarily dangerous for navigation and aviation flights.
The collapse of the Soviet Union resulted in a reduction in Moscow's military and political influence abroad. The Mediterranean region was not an exception. In 1992, the Mediterranean military flotilla was dissolved, which opened the way for NATO to fully dominate the area. Now Russia has returned. Experts maintain that the security of the Mediterranean Sea on the outskirts of the Black Sea region has gained special significance over the past years following the developments in the region, and any possible confrontation between the Russian and American military fleets in the sea can highly affect the balance of power in the region. Experts believe the expansion of the Russian maritime contingent in this area will force the United States to reconsider possible plans to attack Syria under the pretext of another, in quotes, chemical attack, or rather its reenactment.
U.S. President Donald Trump reportedly plans to remove the current Defense Minister Mattis, who is known for his objection to any military confrontation with Russia. If this happens, it will lead to a change in the U.S. military strategy. Russia warns with its military exercises where one should not be at loggerheads with Moscow.
Vostok 2018 drills kicked off in late August. The objective of the exercises was announced to be testing the armed forces' readiness before the Vostok 2018 war games scheduled for September 11th till 15th in the Russian Far East. Military exercises included Chinese troops for the first time in what is being viewed as a major geopolitical shift and caused irritation in Japan. The head of the defense ministry accused Russia and China of increasing military activity in the region. Marina Kartunova, Press TV, Moscow.